Me. Hello, everyone. I'm Cornell Hanxomphou. I am the Rights Officer at the Environmental Rights Centre for Scotland, and I want to cover what human rights and environmental rights, the connection is, and why that's might be important to your work. And then noting that it is about the environment, but it is also about us as humans, about health. So just to speak a little bit about our organization, what we aim to do is our vision is to have a Scotland where every person's right to live in a healthy environment is fully realized. And this is more pertinent than any time another when we are facing a triple planetary crisis of climate breakdown, biodiversity crisis, and also pollution of all of our land and sea and water and air. Some of what we have four streams of work that we tried to do to tackle this, and one of them was, which is what I'm doing now, is awareness raising and outreach of environmental rights, so people understand what their environmental rights are. And once that gets enacted in the Human Rights Bill, you are aware of what they are and you are able to enforce them, and you also understand what your rights are today to able to fight whatever environmental issues, environmental injustices that your organization, or the people you represent may be facing. We also have a free legal advice service. So this advice service is for anyone from the public, communities, individuals who are facing any environmental cases or have any environmental issues that pertains to environmental law, or anything that is related to environmental law, like transport or culture, things like that. We have an advocacy we do advocacy in policy and law reform. So when we are aware of multiple areas where our environmental rights and laws and policies are just not up to scratch and are basically unfair for people who are facing environmental issues, and is in favor usually of developers and polluters. So we are looking for changes in that. And when push comes to shove, we have the option of doing strategic public litigation. So just to cover what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to talk about Scotland's environmental problems, what the right to a healthy environment is, and what it means in the Human Rights Bill, particularly what features are of that right, the human right to a healthy environment, and then just how that might be relevant to you, some of our cases. So Scotland has a number of substantive environmental problems, and these are related to places and people. In terms of places, you've got air, water, and noise pollution, which are distributed differently around Scotland. You have areas that have much more derelict land, and so areas of deprivation will tend to have more proximity to derelict land. Environmental quality has been decreasing over the last decade. It's decreased over 16% in terms of funding that local authorities get for this. So this means a decrease in litter picking up. There's more dog fouling, there's more graffiti, there's more fly tipping, and then it creates a more unsociable area in terms of green spaces and blue spaces. And then there is an increase of health inequalities that come from all of this. We know that poor environments contributed to inequalities in health. There can be differences of up to 23.8 years in men compared to areas of lowest deprivation to highest deprivation, and up to 22.6 years in women. We know there's an extensive body of research that shows the social importance of green spaces, and not having those is really detrimental to not having that social cohesion within your communities, having that basically that space to get away, and that's a lot of physical health benefits there. So what are the substantive problems in terms of people? So people on low income and people in areas of deprivation tend to be more impacted by environmental injustices. So we're talking about they might be closer to derelict land, like we say, might be closer to industrial processes, which cause that air, water, and noise pollution. This all has a health effect. children, older people, people with health problems are much, much more vulnerable to these health problems and that come from environmental hazards. After all this, we also see people may have a vulnerability to severe weather events. For example, if you're living with a disability, you're much more vulnerable to severe weather events. You have to have a different escape plan. You have to have different things you have to think about when with weather events. You can't. It's not as the same as everyone people, so it's not equal there. And this is what we call distributional environmental injustice, because the injustices of the environment are not spread equally in Scotland's population. So when you face these issues, you think you can go through the normal processes, you can possibly go to court as a last case scenario. But this is why I need to point out what Scotland's environmental procedural problems are. So the procedure you would go through when you have an issue. So one of the big issues is participation in decision-making and holding public bodies and polluters to account. So equality groups, people who suffer from poverty are less likely to be participating in local decision-making solely because they are too busy dealing with other things. So if you're too busy trying to put food on the table to feed your family, you're too busy trying to get enough money to heat the house, you're not going to be too focused on changing what's going on with the factory next door that might be causing harm to your respiratory system because of air pollution, or the fact that there are not enough parks nearby for children to play in. As a result of this, you become less aware. There's a likelihood of less awareness of rights, and so you aren't able to hold up those rights if you don't know what those rights are and to enforce them. And then if you are involved in the decision making, you are aware of your rights, and then you know that they've been broken, and you decide to take legal action, your access to justice, it's basically stupidly expensive to do that. You could basically go bankrupt because of it, and it becomes a huge risk, and no one ends up going forward with those processes. So what does that end up causing? It causes poor enforcement of planning and nature conservation law. It creates no credible threat of legal challenge, and then it encourages the environment and nature destruction and contributes to climate emergency. So this is what we call the procedural environmental injustices. So just to speak quickly on the Human Rights Bill, the consultation opened on the 15th of June. It closes on the 5th of October. We tried to get it extended. They said, no, we've got to do it quite quickly. If you have the time and capacity to respond to the consultation, I highly recommend you do so. It incorporates a number of rights into the Human Rights Bill from the UN treaties, including economic, social, cultural, and environmental rights. The consultation itself has 9 parts, but the human right to a healthy environment is just mostly about part 5. So if that's what you're interested in, that's the only part you have to reply to. You don't have to do the whole lot. Why is environmental rights important? What's it got to do with the other human rights? All human rights are interdependent. This includes ones between environmental law and human rights obligation. So a healthy environment simply underpins the right to life because it's got so much to do with health, whether it's benefits or burdens of the environment. The ICESCA, so the International Convention on Economic, Social, Cultural Rights, also has the right of adequate standard of living, which includes food and improvement of living conditions. The human right to a healthy environment is linked to that with what your living conditions is in terms of your local environment and how it affects your health. Healthy, sustainable food is part of the human right to a healthy environment. So these are all things that are interlinked, so they need to be coexisting. And another example is the right to the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health. To be able to achieve that, you need to be also ensure that you have a healthy environment that you're living in. So what is part of the human right to a healthy environment? So there's 6 substantive features, which is clean air, safe climate, access to safe water and sanitation, healthy and sustainable food, non-toxic environments to live, work, study, and play, and healthy biodiversity and ecosystems. Now, these are not yet part of Scots law, but they do become it, and it is very likely to be so. A good example of this is to say that if there is a development that is creating a whole lot of greenhouse gases, or it's likely that it is to pollute the air in your local area, and it doesn't quite fit into planning law and things like that, you can point out that you have a right to a safe climate, to clean air. And this development would directly impact on this. Another example is non-toxic environments to live, work, study, and play. If you live in an area that has a high density of derelict land, there's not a lot of good quality green space. This does affect your health and your well-being, and so you can point out this right, number 5, and that can be used as a lever, a policy tool to change policies that the government are enacting. So it's useful for people, but it's also useful for the government itself. So when they are trying to push in progressive policies, and they are faced with corporate interests that say, no, this is impeding on our corporate rights, they can point out that they have a obligation, they have a duty to ensure that people have their healthy environment and they have these rights. So it's also a shield for the government as much as it is for people, for progressive movement. And we also have the 3 procedural elements: so access to information, public participation, access to justice, and effective remedies. Now, these are included in under Scotland's signature under the UK for the Aarhus Convention, but we are not fully compliant by any means. Access to justice is still prohibitively expensive. Access to information is something we have under the Information Act, but it is not by no means perfect. So these are not fully implemented into Scots law yet, but we hope for them to be. So just a few examples of what we've got. So on our website, if you look on our rights page, we've got an example of Voices for Justice, and we call this that because it's advice clients that we've had who've gone and faced and fought their own environmental injustice issues, which may have occurred over years, in some cases decades, and where they're basically fighting an uphill battle, and they're recounting what they had to do, what help they needed from an organization like us, and what really needs to continue to change. As you can see in the middle there's the fight to stop the Clydebank incinerator, and that's a case in Clydebank where an incinerator was put up in a previously high industrial area, which is now a residential area, and the locals did not want that because of the risk of air pollution and contributing to the already highly deprived area, and not being any help to the local community and being detrimental to everyone, especially when there was a public school, kids school, very close proximity to the proposed development, as well as a hospice. So they protested against this. They got advice from ourselves. They wrote to they appealed to the development application. It went through all the way to government and away from the local authority, and eventually the developers dropped it because of pressure. So that was one of the wins that was quite fortunate, but it doesn't need to be something this complicated. We're talking about things like, say, the right to healthy food and sustainability. Using that right, you can use that as a policy lever to ensure that the food system is improved for those who really need it. So it's a useful tool, both as an individual case and as policy, as systematic case. That's all I'll speak about today, and that's just a few of the resources you'll be given later. Thanks very much for listening.